India, home to the largest democracy in the world, has been led by many political parties. The co-founder of one such political party, a man known as a visionary and a brilliant diplomat, who led India through tumultuous times, astute, decisive, and a wonderful poet. Let us have a look at the life of Bharat Ratna Atal Bihari Vajpayee. Atal Bihari, son of Krishna Bihari, was a young Brahmin born on Christmas Day, the 25th of December. Atal was brilliant in studies and scored good marks, his father even insisting his teachers to put Atal under more scrutiny. In spite of being in Gwalior, a princely state, the waves of the Quit India movement of 1942 did not pass Atal in a tranquil manner. 17-year-old Atal was arrested and thrown in the Agra jail for 23 days, even though he did not actively participate in the destruction of a government building by a group in Bateshwar. The late Prime Minister would often reminisce about this incident as a recollection of his freedom struggle. At a young age of 14, Atal started going to the shakhas of Rashtriya Samaj Sevak Sangh, infamously known as RSS. RSS greatly influenced him. Atal even quoted saying RSS was his soul years after his retirement. With the help of RSS, a political party named Jan Sangh was established by Shyam Prasad Mukherjee in 1951. By 1952, Atal became an assistant to Shyam Prasad, even accompanying him in his journey throughout Kashmir, during which Shyam Prasad would pass away. The reins of Jan Sangh would pass on to Deen Dayal Upadhyay, now president of the party, who saw great potential in Atal. He was so keen to get Atal in the parliament that in 1957, he made him contest over 3 seats, Atal winning from the Balrampur one, and thus becoming the leader of the political party in the parliament, the voice of Jan Sangh.
In his time in the Lok Sabha, where a small party of 4 seats would hardly heed attention, Atal made most of his limited speech time garnering attention from prominent figures, including Jawaharlal Nehru. Nehru once introduced Atal to the British Prime Minister, stating, "He is a young leader of the opposition who is always criticizing me, but I see in him a great future." This confidence was further reflected when Atal was elected by Nehru as a member of the National Integration Council to fight issues like communalism, casteism, and regionalism. However, even before the first meeting of NIC, Atal lost his seat to Congress in the 1962 Lok Sabha elections. What's interesting is, when he was asked to campaign against Atal, Nehru said, "No, I cannot. Don't persuade me. He is very much interested in external affairs." External affairs was not only Nehru's pet subject but also Atal's. Such was his impact on his opposition. During his time as an MP, he motioned key issues like compulsory training to all under the Arms Act, donations from companies to be banned under the Companies Act, the acceptance of Sindhi language under the 8th Schedule, and the controversial anti-adulteration of edible oils. However, his most pioneering speech was on Tibet in 1959, even before border tensions between India and China had risen. When we accepted the sovereignty of China on Tibet, we made a mistake. That day was an unfortunate day. Where has the Panchasheel agreement gone? I represent a small party, but our party defends the independence of Tibet. We want friendship with China, but we should not build the palace of this friendship on the dead body of Tibet's independence. Eloquent words from an eloquent man.
By 1967, the political tides were shifting away from Congress, fueled by the death of Jawaharlal Nehru. Deen Dayal Upadhyay, who was the president of Jan Sangh party, died mysteriously after being pushed from a train. The party presidency was thus passed on to Atal Bihari Vajpayee. Atal was the best choice, as his diplomatic moderate style would be a key in traversing the fierce political climate at the time. Indira Gandhi was often found at the receiving end of Atal's remarks, as he neither shield away from criticism nor praise for the opposition. He compared Indira to Durga goddess for her actions during 1971 Indo-Pak War. However, he also commented, "Ekom dvitvo nasti, there is no one but me." When this feeling comes, it leads a person to dictatorship. Srimati Indira Gandhi must be aware of this, he said. And dictatorship it was. With the onset of emergency in 1975, Atal was one of the many politicians in detention, and the subsequent election in 1977 brought immense publicity to him. The opposition co-aligned to form the Janata Party, and it absorbed the Jansangha. This formed the Moraji Desai government, Atal Bihari leading the external affairs front. His voracious appetite for knowledge reflected in all his speeches that drove thousands to listen to him. His diplomatic approach led many to follow him under the Janata Party, even though it was filled with views at two extreme ends.
Now that we've reached a point in Atal's life where he gained a substantial position in the Indian political scenario, let's look at individual instances that shaped our view of the statesman. Atal Bihari was popular amongst both sides of the parliament and he truly respected his colleagues. An instance where Anup Mishra, nephew of Atal Bihari Vajpayee and BJP MP of Madhya Pradesh, was complaining about Digvijay Singh, the then CM of Madhya Pradesh. You always say he's a good man, but his trouble. Yes, I still say that he's a good man, said Atal Bihari Vajpayee, cutting his nephew's sentence short. One of his secretaries quoted saying, "We used to have frequent interactions with Atalji. But what struck me was that he never spoke ill of anyone. The only time I saw him take a jibe was at his political rival in those days, Balraj Madhok. Otherwise, he was not at all judgmental and was very generous." Humility in power. When Atal was a prime minister, on one particular day, Russian President Vladimir Putin was in town. An author wanted to give a copy of his book to Atal, and the prime minister spent a good 15 minutes with him, in spite of his busy schedule. Even though he had a high stature and could afford to take things for granted, he never did so. Former Ambassador Amit Das Gupta remembers how, in Brussels, all the MPs who had come in an official delegation led by the Speaker of the Lok Sabha in the early 1990s raised a shrindi when they were given single rooms instead of suites that had been proposed earlier. Atal was the exception. He readily accepted what was on offer. On the George Bush Iraq invasion, eminent journalist Vinod Mehta wrote, "I'm convinced if Vajpayee had not been the PM, India would have been sent to fight in George Bush's Iraq invasion. He dreaded phone calls from George, imploring him to send even a token force. His soldiers are dying, and now he wants my soldiers to die? I will never let that happen," Atal explained. He summoned A.B. Bardhan and Hari Kishan Singh Surjeet, leaders from the left whose parties were holding demonstrations against the Iraq invasion, and asked them how the demonstrations were going. They said they were going well. Vajpayee said, "But I cannot hear anything." A cunning leader was suggesting that they raise the decibel level of the protests so he could tell Bush that his hands were tied, that he had to protect his land.
Atal Bihari had been extremely active throughout his political career when it came to external affairs. He was one of the first political leaders to speak out against Chinese propaganda and imperialism in Tibet. Subsequent events proved that this apprehension was correct and culminated in the Indo-Sino War of 1962. There are numerous instances reflecting how he kept the country above all and led the infrastructural revolution that is still accruing interest for our economy and international trade. Perhaps this is why the whole nation got united in a unanimous call to felicitate him with the Bharat Ratna after he retired. Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru respected young Vajpayee as a leader in the opposition and sent him to represent India at the International Forum in the UN General Assembly, where he was the first person ever to deliver a speech in Hindi. This speech is still widely remembered by everyone throughout the world. During the Kargil War, he rallied against a menacing Pakistani leadership that betrayed him after feigning peace talks and stood staunch as a rock to garner international support for India.
हम शांति चाहते हैं, ये तो दुनिया ने देखा। अब दुनिया ये देखेगी कि हम शांति की रक्षा के लिए और अपनी शक्ति का भी प्रदर्शन कर सकते हैं।
When the American president called Mr. Vajpayee one night and advised him to give Kashmir to Pakistan lest it launch a nuclear strike, Vajpayee said, "I have considered that 50% of India can be wiped off, but I can assure you, there would be no sign of Pakistan on the world map by tomorrow if such a thing happens." With the motto of Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan, Jai Vigyan, Vajpayee truly realized the capacity of scientific research to change the nation. And with the same zeal by which he never lost faith in the Pokhran nuclear tests, he appointed Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam as his president. It was a clear message to the international community saying that we were adopting a path of development through technology.
At 15:45 hours, India conducted 3 underground nuclear tests in the Pokhran range.
Atal came to Delhi in 1950 at the dawn of the Indian Republic when he was barely 25 years old. And he retired in 2005, an 81-year-old man who had loved his country and served her to his fullest. Atal Bihari Vajpayee thus changed the destiny of India forever.